Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Flashback Friday, right here on the Squared Circle Maniacs Pro Wrestling Podcast. As always, I'm Johnny Bottles, and as always, that's Dr. Don Wayne, the neckbeard psychologist from Twitter.
I'm here to help them out.
He's there to make your life more pleasant. AEW neckbeards.
We are having some technical difficulties tonight, gentlemen. Taking us a little bit longer to get on than we normally do. Apparently,
Yes.
StreamYard is having issues with Android devices. Motorhead is probably going to do a run-in a little bit later. So stay tuned, baby. We're about to get into it. We're about to cover, in my opinion, one of the greatest eras of professional wrestling. Greatest era ever. If you ask me, 84 to 90 is the greatest era of professional wrestling. That's my personal opinion. It was the hottest. It was drawing the most people. It was drawing the most eyes. That, to me, will always be the era. And tonight we're going to talk about one of the unsung heroes of that era, the great Paul Orndorff and the feud he had against Hogan. And Bottles, I was surprised you didn't know a whole lot about this feud.
I really didn't know that much about it. I know that they hated one another going into WrestleMania 1. And with the Piper and Orndorff versus Hogan and Mr. T.
Yes,
got a lot of eyes
Lauper
on the WWE. Cyndi Lauper was involved also. The war to settle the score, if you will.
Yes.
And I really wasn't that big of a fan of Hulk Hogan's. That's probably why I didn't pay that much attention to what happened with Hogan and Orndorff. I was more of a fan of the tag team division. I liked a lot of the heels. Orndorff, going back after we decided this is what we're going to do, I went back and watched a lot of videos, promos, matches, just sundry matches with Orndorff. Not to mention the blow-off for this, the main event. The 70,000
That's exactly
plus.
What it was.
The 70,000
that wasn't
plus.
even the main event. That was just the damn match. That wasn't the blow-off.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That was the damn match. That was the damn match. Orndorff.
It's insane.
It was. I never saw a crowd that rabid for pro wrestling before.
Ready to come unglued. I'm ready to get into it, Bottles. You want to start off? You want me to start off where this thing kicks off at?
You start off, brother. You start off.
So we're in the, this is right after WrestleMania 2. We're in June, July time frame, right?
Right.
And Paul Orndorff, Mr. Wonderful himself, was in WrestleMania 1's main event just a year prior. WrestleMania 2, he opened the whole card. So he had fallen that far down the match card. Hogan had just come off of the Bundy stint, which did not go over as well as they had hoped. Back then, they didn't do storyline-driven episodes for wrestling. Everything with Hogan was always, here comes a big giant, he's got a beef, he wants a title match, and he would jump him. Same thing happened with Bundy on the Saturday Night's main event. That's how he got to be the main event guy for WrestleMania 2. Literally a month before the show, that's how they made this thing happen. So Paul Orndorff is a face at this point in time. He had gotten into it with Roddy Piper a few months earlier. He'd been running as a face. He comes on one of the greatest segments that wrestling ever had, the Flower Shot.
The Flower
Shot. Ran that? Do you remember who ran that?
Adrian Adonis with the flower-encrusted microphone. I watched that today, doing my homework, my due diligence for the show. I thought it was fantastic. I thought what they showed in the back was fantastic, and Hogan's reaction was fantastic.
It was absolutely great. So they're bringing out, they being, Bobby Heenan is there as well. Let's make sure that's up front as well.
Of course.
Bobby Heenan was always there in the middle of the shit-stirring spot. He was Hogan's greatest nemesis for 5 years. You can say whatever you want. Everybody that had to get to Hogan had to have Bobby in their corner. Adrian Adonis, for 2 and 3 weeks, with Bobby Heenan, telling Orndorff he is, quote, Hogan Jr. He's lost his meanness. He's not the same guy. And this goes on for weeks and weeks, and it's absolutely magnificent. Hogan Jr. And it has one of the high spots of all of wrestling. If you've never seen it, do yourself a favor and Google it. Hogan gets a call from Paul Orndorff when he's in the gym. And the person on the other line with Orndorff is saying, he's too busy training to come to the phone right now. And Orndorff goes crazy. Flips out. Lost his shit. What do you mean he's too busy to come talk to me? Lost it. Hilarity ensues. If you're watching this, you can't help but laugh at it, even all these years later. The next week, I mean, this is a 5 to 6 week buildup. Next week, Hogan's on the program with them. They agree to take on one of Bobby Heenan's tag teams. This is all the buildup, folks. I'm trying to give you the backstory so we can get to the buildup to see where this is going.
Right.
Paul Orndorff refuses to tag in Hogan for this first tag team match that they show on TV. And they show it everywhere. Now, don't forget back then, if you saw Hogan wrestle on a TV show, that was big news, man. You didn't see Hogan wrestle on TV back then, unless it was on Saturday Night's Main Event, which is a whole other topic. But you just didn't see him wrestle. So the fact they were replaying this stuff, for me as a fan, I was 8 or 9 years old at the time. This is my hype. This is when I'm getting into wrestling. This is when I'm like, Hogan's on my TV. This is great. The next week, Hogan's in the ring again against some of Bobby Heenan's guys, Big John Studd and Bundy. And they're beating the hell out of him. And then finally Paul Orndorff acts like he comes in and he's going to clear the ring, and they all get out. And he goes to raise Hogan's head, or it looks like it, and short arm clothesline. It was the first time that a friend had turned on Hogan. It was the first time Hogan had been involved in a storyline to this point of this link to actually make him an opponent that was not only judged by the fans as being worthy, but judged by the fans as being a true shit heel, a true prick. What did you think about this when you started reviewing some of this stuff?
I thought it was fantastic. I thought everybody played their part very, very well. I like the fact that Adonis, after setting the ball on the tee, he stood back with Jimmy Hart. And it let the interplay be between Heenan and Orndorff, because Heenan was going to play a crucial part in the whole angle. So I thought that was fantastic. Orndorff losing his shit on the phone in the back, that was amazing. You have to see it. Paul Orndorff seemed like he was a very, very scary man back then. He was I wouldn't call it a roid rage. Maybe he just, he kirked out. And lost it completely when Hogan couldn't come to the phone. And Hogan's sitting in the gym or in a training facility of some sort, narrating this in a video that's on YouTube. Hogan actually narrates the setup for the whole thing, offers his comment. It's fantastic. I watched it today. Guys, it's only 14 and a half minutes long, I believe. The entire match and the entire setup, I think. And it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Perfectly done. So this whole angle sets up where they are suddenly going to have a huge match.
Yes.
In Toronto. Not a pay-per-view, Bottles. Not a pay-per-view. We're not going to have this on TV. It's a one-off. And this angle got... go ahead.
Back in those days, they used to have special events strictly on VHS. VHS was a burgeoning market back then. VHS and Betamax. So what they would do is they would put out tapes like this. And WCW do the same thing. They had, good Lord, the name of that tag team tournament escapes me. They had it from Baltimore Civic Center, Baltimore, Maryland.
Oh, yeah, I know.
You know what I'm talking about. The Great Mood and some other guy won, I believe.
Yeah.
But this was called The Big Event on Coliseum Home Video.
Yes, sir.
Vince realized he could make money selling videotapes and not having it on pay-per-view.
He also realized, I've got the hottest angle I've ever had in my entire life. This is the hottest angle he had ever had in his entire life in his company. Bundy was big. All of that stuff was big. All of that stuff was great. This was white hot. You couldn't cool this off with a freaking iceberg. It was so hot. People wanted to see Hogan get his hands on Orndorff. And mind you, Orndorff looked like a Greek god. He looked like a guy that could really hold his own against Hogan. Built well. One of my favorite parts about seeing Orndorff come to the ring was that robe. That red Mr. Wonderful with the rhinestones all over it. That thing was great. And Bobby Heenan in the black robe or his black jacket with the other rhinestones, absolutely perfect. I loved everything about this. They were off to the races, off to Toronto, in front of 65,000 people. Now that's the confirmed number. WWE over the years has tried to say 75. 65 was confirmed. The stadium was built to hold like 54,000. Like, that's how insane this was. People were losing their shit, and the way it ended made them go even crazier because it didn't have a clean finish. It was a wonky finish. Hogan didn't get the clean victory. Orndorff didn't get a clean loss. It didn't hurt either one of them, and it projected them for the next 5 months to have one of the biggest money runs, and the biggest money runs, as a matter of fact, in Paul Orndorff's career. It was phenomenally done.
The difference between that crowd and that video clip that I watched today of this bout and the crowds they have nowadays is, folks, back then you would eat nachos and popcorn, burgers and hot dogs like a ball game. You would drink plenty of beer, copious amounts of beer. You didn't have a cell phone to dick around on and take pictures of the wrestlers in the crowd and cut promos to yourself and your selfie cam. Yeah, they didn't do any of that stuff back then. Every once in a while, if the lights went out, like a rock concert, they would take their lighter and click their lighter up in the air. But they paid attention to what was going on around them in the ring, the entrances. They absorbed everything, and they were rabid. This crowd was off the hook. And if you don't believe me, go on YouTube and look this up. Like Don sent me the link for it, and I watched it. It's strictly the narration, how it sets up, and the Hogan and Orndorff match. They were going berserk. And
what did you think of all the cops that had to walk them down to the ring, man?
Incredible.
It's crazy, right?
Incredible. And I saw the card right now. I'm looking at the card on the back of the Coliseum home video cover for the big event. Here's what was on the card. I assume this was the curtain jerker. The Killer Bees versus Hoss and Jimmy Jack Funk. That's Dory Funk and Jimmy Jack Funk. Magnificent Morocco versus Haku. Back then he was known as King Tonga. Now this could have been the curtain jerker, I take it back. Ted Arcidi, at the time the world's strongest man. Remember they were trying to do something with him?
They were always trying to get the strongest man in there somehow. Whoever was the world's strongest man that year, they were forever trying to get them in the business.
He worked Tony Garea. Probably one of Tony's last matches for the company. Junkyard Dog versus Adrian Adonis. Dirty Dick Slater versus Iron Mike Schick.
Nice.
Good Lord Almighty. It's probably a lot of, yeah! Ah! A lot of that.
I would guarantee it.
Bobby Heenan, Big John Studd, and King Kong Bundy versus Captain Lou Albano and his faction of the Machines, which was obviously back in those days. It was Blackjack Mulligan, the masked superstar who went on to become Axe from Demolition, and Andre the Giant.
I mean, does it get any better than that?
You had Billy Jack Haynes versus Hercules. I guess it was a battle of the full Nelsons.
See, and Hercules was big back then. People don't realize Hercules was a big draw there for a while. He had a lot of people that liked him. Now, It wasn't the best. It wasn't the best card ever. I'll put it to you this way. That card, if you put that card without Hogan, you're not drawing 15,000 people. They drew 65,000 people with Hogan and Orndorff. Let that just sink in. So everybody that screams, well, they could do it today if they wanted to. No, you couldn't. No, you couldn't. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you why. They used to have a show called Saturday Night's Main Event. That was special. It was a special. It didn't happen all the time. It was a special. And it was
third Saturday of every month they would preempt Saturday Night Live.
And it would come on late as hell and drew numbers like you wouldn't believe. It drew on average anywhere from 9 to 11. To this day, the Saturday Night's Main Event against Andre the Giant is still the highest viewed wrestling show in history. 33.5 million people saw that show. Saw the show. How insane is that? And now they're jumping up and down over 2.5 million.
And that's when they had cable TV.
Yeah.
They had cable TV back then. They had HBO, they had Cinemax, they had Showtime. Because I had all that shit. And I watched it. I was one of the guys who got sucked into it. And I thought it was fantastic.
I loved everything about it. So this match goes down
65,000. I just want to throw in one thing for the really, really old school guys here. Harley Race worked Pedro Morales on this card.
Yes, he did. Harley was working the WWE a lot in the mid to late 80s, and people don't realize that. Yeah. He was King Harley Race.
Yes.
Him and that god-awful perm. Now, so I'm going to tell you, this feud hits with me because this was my first live event. I was living in Utah at the time, and my dad said, that's it, we're going to go see wrestling. We got to see Orndorff and Hogan. That was my dad's view. We have got to see this. This is the card that I saw. Dan Spivey beat Moondog Spot. Not a big deal. Cool. Tito Santana and Jake Roberts went at it. Mike Rotunda and Moondog Rex. So I got both the Moondogs that night. King Harley versus, who the hell was that? Kiniski. Nick Kiniski was there. The British Bulldogs versus the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov.
Oh, my
This
God.
is what I saw as a kid. Butch Reed and Steve Gotterwolf, that was nothing. That was a let me up match.
Gator Wolf. Gator Wolf.
Yeah. Randy Savage against the Junkyard Dog.
That must have been a hell of a match right there.
It had I've talked about it before, but for anybody who hadn't heard, it had I've never seen this ending before in my life. I've never seen it since. Macho Man's got Junkyard Dog pinned. And Junkyard Dog bench presses him off of him, but his shoulders are still on the mat. And the ref counts 3. And the place explodes like, what the hell just happened? He had him off of him. No. His shoulders were down, but he bench pressed him off. And as soon as he counted 3, Macho Man shot out of the ring, grabbed that belt, and ran like hell with Miss Elizabeth tailing behind him. Great. Then it was Dino Bravo and Dirty Dick Slater. And, of course, the main event, the main attraction, Hulk Hogan got the leg drop on Paul Orndorff for the 1-2-3, and this was in November of 1986. It was still going strong. So from that Canada show, they went on a series of matches in stadiums across the country. Mm-hmm. I sent you some links today. I'm not sure if you had time to look at them. The show that I saw in 1986 drew 14,000 people on Sunday night. Hogan didn't wrestle again until 6 days later in Pittsburgh, I believe, or up in Hershey, one of those spots, where it drew 13,000 people. Both shows were sellouts. In 2 shows in 6 days, Hogan and Orndorff sold 27,000 tickets. Oh, and by the way, they kept doing this all the way until January the next year. It is quite simply one of the greatest feuds that most people have never heard about, which, guess what won Pro Wrestling Insider's Feud of the Year in 1986?
The Orndorff-Hogan feud.
This won Pro Wrestling Insiders, and they hated to give Hogan props back then. They hated even mentioning him because they didn't consider him a pro wrestler. They didn't like him.
Mm-hmm. And every year in Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the most hated man was Ric Flair. That particular year, Paul Orndorff beat out Ric Flair as most hated man.
Let that sink in. That's unbelievable. And so many people don't know about this feud. They were selling out 15 and 20,000 seat arenas 3 times a week and just going coast to coast with the same show. I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely phenomenal when you look back on this, because they had not one. They didn't do just one Saturday night's main event with these 2 guys. They did 2 of them. They did 2 Paul Orndorff versus Hogan Saturday night's main event. It finally had the blow-off moment in January, right before Hogan got ready to go up against Andre the Giant, because that was going to be his next big storyline, his next big opponent. They had the blow-off match in the steel cage, and they didn't do it like another one. They didn't do it like every other match. They restarted the steel cage match because a dirty ref, Dirty Danny Davis, was at ringside and said Orndorff won. So they had to restart it. How? When you look at the annals of time and you go back and you look at stuff like this, this is as good as wrestling is ever going to get. It's as good as it's ever going to be. This was a 6-month journey that took the fans on the wildest ride with a heated rivalry with the biggest star that wrestling's ever had, with a guy that was jerking the curtain 2 months prior at WrestleMania. It's just amazing to me.
Well, they have a history together. In fact, they tagged together, I'm reading right now, in New Japan Pro Wrestling back in the late 70s, early 80s, before they got to WWE. So they were good friends, and they worked together well as a tag team. And like one could predict what the other one was going to do. During this match that I watched today, I did a little research in how...
Which one did you watch today? Did you watch the Toronto match?
I watched the Toronto match.
Okay.
And the referee was a ringer. He was a referee, a local Canadian wrestler, a retired wrestler. He wrestled as the Maltese Falcon. I forgot his real name. He wrestled as the Maltese Falcon. I would assume he did it under a mask. And yes, just named after the Bogart movie, the Maltese Falcon. And the gimmick was when Hogan wouldn't get off of Orndorff for the 4 count in the ropes, he grabbed Hogan's mullet and pulled Hogan back and got involved that way. And that was a trend that ran in a lot of those matches around the country with different referees. They would, a lot of times a match would end in a DQ. The belt wouldn't change hands.
Like I mean, they were big on that. Anything on TV, they were not going to let you get a free show.
Right. Dusty finish in this match, by the way, in the Canadian Stadium. So
yes, it was. And that's sort of what always got me a little confused on this, because it wasn't a pay-per-view. It was going straight to VHS. It's now, if you go to the WWE Peacock website, it's actually part of their pay-per-view program now. They've got it listed on there somewhere. This, to me, was the first unofficial SummerSlam. This was the first unofficial SummerSlam.
Yeah, it was middle of August, yeah.
This got the idea in Vince's head, hey, guys, we could start running more shows than just WrestleMania and the Royal Rumble and everything else. We can do more shows. Because I think the Royal Rumble came along in 1989 or 88? I can't remember what year.
I can't recall.
But this also had a detrimental effect to Paul Orndorff for his actual life. This feud, while it was great to watch, it absolutely crushed him physically. He sustained a neck injury and nerve damage to his right arm training one day, lifting weights, so extensively that he had to have surgery or he was going to lose the functionality in that right arm. It was going to atrophy to nothingness. He said he was making so much damn money coming off the road against Hogan never entered his thought. That's how much cash he was bringing in. That where I need to have this surgery, I'm making 10 grand a week. I think I'm going to have to suck this up. Chris says the first Royal Rumble was in 88. So, yeah, I mean, to me, this was the first unofficial SummerSlam, man. Loved everything about this. Paul Orndorff, of course, after this, he would have a few feuds, but it was never the same after this. He went on to WCW a few years later after his semi-retirement, won a TV title, won a couple of tag team titles over there. I know Chris said earlier in here it was a shame that he never got a WWE title. The WWE only had 3 titles back then. You were either the mid-card best or you were the top guy, and there was no in between. And if you weren't a tag team, then, because God knows Vince McMahon didn't like tag teams back then. Thank God for the British Bulldogs and the Hart Foundation and Demolition, but we might not have ever gotten any good runs.
Changed the whole complexion of everything.
It did.
They really did.
So I didn't want to dwell too long, but this was one of the things about wrestling that really turned me on as a fan. This was my personal first big wrestling angle that I ever saw and followed as a fan. This was it. I'd seen a match here and there. I'd seen the Nature Boy here and there. I saw Hogan all the time. This was the one that said, damn, this is something to it. And they've been doing this shit in Mid-South forever. If Mid-South had had any better production quality and gotten on cable, they might have beat these guys out in the long run.
They could have. Mid-South, I don't know what it was with Mid-South, why they couldn't gain any traction and become a national phenomenon. Great wrestlers, great workers down there.
That production value was shit. They were shooting it in a semi boys gym. It was so bad.
Terrible.
Go back and watch that early shit, man. It was terrible. The storylines were great, but the actual production value was just god awful.
Yeah.
Well, Bottles, that's all I got for Paul Orndorff Hogan. It was a 6-month feud. It was never revisited. How crazy is that, by the way? You would have thought that somewhere in the annals of time, somewhere along the line, Vince McMahon would have fired this one back up again, right? It made so much money, it makes sense to fire this back up.
Well,
and they never touched it.
Orndorff had a bad arm.
But they never even thought about it. They never even went back after it. Hogan feuded with Macho Man for, ever.
Yes.
Forever.
Yes,
they were in house shows in the mid-'80s and nobody ever knew it. They were feuding then. Then he won the title. They kept feuding. It was constant. So good.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They don't make them like that anymore, pal. Hogan sold the majority of this match.
Yeah.
This big event blow off. Well, not the blow off, but he sold the majority of the match, which I was amazed about. He was down on his hands and knees on the mat trying to get back up again.
He did that for most of his wrestling shows back then. He was always the guy that would sell the baby face. The huge monster baby face was selling a smaller guy beating him up, which is always asinine to me, which is why they had to get bigger guys like, Earthquake and all those huge guys come in there
Bundy
to make
and
it look
Stud and
reasonable.
all those guys. Yeah. And what amazed me was how big. You forget how big Hulk Hogan was physically back then. To see him with the huge The huge pumpkin head, the big shoulders and arms, the huge torso, the big legs. He was enormous, an enormous man. He wasn't the Hollywood Hogan from WCW. That guy was a shadow of the 1986, 1987 Hulk Hogan.
He still weighed 260, 270 pounds. He wasn't small by any means, even then.
He had to be over 300 in this match.
No, I'm talking about when WCW. He was 260, 270 in WCW in his later years. This match, he was well over $3 bills. He was absolutely jacked to the gills. The other part about this I wanted to cover real quick, I forgot to mention, their Saturday night's main event drew a 10.6 Nielsen rating.
Wow.
Do you know what that means as far as people that watched, what that number is? It equates to like 22 million people. 22 million people tuned in at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night.
10.6 is 10.6 million people.
No, this was back then. I looked it up. It was 22.5 million people. 10.6 Nielsen rating. Just like the Nielsen rating was 15 for the Andre show, but it drew 33.5 million eyes. I looked it up. Trust me.
Well, nowadays, when they say the SmackDown did a 2.5, that means 2.5 million people watched it.
No, this drew a 10.5 or 10.6 Nielsen rating, which equated to around 22.5 million people. 22.5 million people watched Hogan fight Orndorff.
Incredible.
When will we ever say that again about wrestling? That more than 5 million people tuned in. I don't know that we'll ever say it again.
You'll never say it again because no shows draw that high outside the Super Bowl. What else?
World Series didn't even do that well this year.
No. The Super Bowl is probably the biggest thing you can say. Back in the day, it used to be the Academy Awards, the Grammys, Country Music Awards. They used to do that, but not anymore.
It's sad, isn't it?
Too many choices.
Sad.
Yeah. Too many choices, too many ways to watch the products. You can watch it in your spare time. You can do it like I do and catch up with everything you missed during the day while you're sitting there retired watching TV. Just check out whatever you have recorded and catch up on everything that way. Everything on the internet.
But there's something. Here's the other thing, the bottles, right? I hear what you're saying, that there's other options. Mm-hmm. There is something that when wrestling is great, there's nothing like seeing it live in the moment. There's nothing like it. Right. You don't want to be that guy that's getting a text from your wrestling buddies at 10:08. Oh my God, did you see what just happened? And you're watching it on replay. You don't want to be that guy. That's the worst. You
don't want to be out at an appointment somewhere while Monday Night Raw is going on. Something big happens, and you're recording it. You're going to watch it a half hour, 45 minutes later when you get home, and you happen to go on Twitter to kill time while you're in a waiting room somewhere or in a car, and someone, his initials, his name rhymes with Spingran. Someone named Spingran will say, and he did the entire play-by-play of the goddamn match. So, or it's just, it will irritate the shit out of you.
My man will give you a play-by-play of everything happening.
Every match. If Excalibur broke wind on AEW Dynamite, or Taz had a heart attack, he would right there.
He's there. He's there. He's not missing.
Not missing anything.
That's what I feel like is missing in today's wrestling. If anybody that didn't grow up back then, and they can't or wasn't, old enough to remember this, you're never going to understand what this was like. You're never going to understand what it was like to be a fan of this product back then when the first time Hogan's allegedly best friend turned on him and the anger that it had everybody pulsating with. Like, you son of a bitch! How dare you turn on Hogan?
Now think about this. The writing back then was done by three guys. Vince McMahon,
Pat Patterson,
and Bruce Pritchard.
And it wasn't really writing, it was a rough script of what they wanted.
Rough script. And in the promos, they said, I want you to mention this, and this. And the guy said, okay, and they just made it up as they went out there. Generally, a lot of times it started off with, let me tell you something, brother, or let me tell you something, daddy, or I'm going to tell you something right now.
Exactly.
It always started like that. And you knew you were in for a freaking treat when those guys started out with the veins popping out of their neck. It was just fantastic.
I got to watching Saturday night's main event tonight just because I was watching all this shit. Dude, you talk about feeling nostalgic right about now. My God in heaven. If you want to get some nostalgia going.
How great was the mind, the wrestling acumen of Pat Patterson?
Oh, he was one of one.
Unbelievable. What guy?
The guy was one of one.
He's the guy who created the Royal Rumble. He pitched it to Vince McMahon, and he's the one who plotted out all the business that took place in the Royal Rumble. Vince might have stepped in and said, hey, I want this guy to go over this guy, and that guy to throw out that guy. No problem, Vince. The crowd will go banana.
Bruce Pritchard does the greatest impression of that guy ever. And then you hit the son of a bitch and you go out of the ring and boom. It's so great. That is all I got tonight, Bottles. Wanted to say real quick before we end the show.
Yes.
Happy Veterans Day weekend to all those that have served. Appreciate your service.
Absolutely.
Being a former veteran, I know the sacrifices these guys still make, and women. And if you're still in, hey, celebrate. This is for you as well.
So many people had their lives changed by the amount of time that they served, where their lives will never be the same again. Never be the same. So when you see those guys out in the street in a wheelchair, trying to open a door with one arm, say thank you.
Buy a veteran a meal sometime. We did get a question. How would you equate when Orndorff turned on Hogan and when Hogan turned on WCW? That was about the same heat. That was about the same heat. When Orndorff turned on Hogan, it was sold out, hanging from the rafters every time they got in the ring together for the next 6 months. Anytime Hogan came on TV for the next year with that program, well, I can't say a year because that shit got watered down so fast, but about 6 months, right? About 6 to 8 months, NWO was really strong. Same thing. It was must-see TV. What's going to happen next? Who's going to screw over who next in this whole thing?
This Orndorff-Hogan match that I watched in Canada, you haven't seen heat like that since I hadn't seen heat like that in a ring since Goldberg-Hogan. Remember how that had a big match feel? And the crowd was going crazy for Hogan and Goldberg. Or Goldberg versus Raven. When, what belt did Raven have? The U.S. title?
U.S. title, I think, yeah.
And Goldberg beat Raven, and he fought off the flock. And the crowd was going crazy back then. They really had something in Bill Goldberg, and they blew it.
Well, I mean, that's what you do if you're WCW. You can't get out of here. But I love this whole thing. I can't wait. What do you want to talk about next? I'm going to give this ball to you now. I'm going to let you put a poll up this week and figure out what we're going to talk about next.
I'll take care of that. I will take care of that. I got to think about that a little bit. But
I don't want to jump straight into the easy targets. We talked about that. Like I want to pull some pearls out of the damn ocean before we go straight gold digging for, say, the Dusty Rhodes Four Horsemen, one of their two big storylines that they had, because that's just easy money.
We've got SmackDown coming up in less than a half hour. I hear.
And no big stars.
I hear that there's going to be a turn on SmackDown, a major turn. That's the rumor going around. What'd you think of that picture I sent you today of CEO Nick Khan?
We're going to talk about this. Well, he's been the CEO. He has for a while, but go to their website. Vince McMahon's still sitting on top as the top dog.
Vince is going to be out soon. Mark my words.
We're going to see.
You know who's buying stock from him? You know who's buying the stock? Some of the stock?
Probably Stephanie.
No. The number one, and number two guys in TKO are going to buy. I think Ari Emanuel is going to buy 1.8 million, and I think another guy's buying another 1 million shares.
Makes sense. They want to take controlling ownership of the company.
Well, they already have controlling ownership.
Yeah, but I mean, really,
look, I've been telling you, I'm telling you guys, and I'm even going to tell a gentleman online whose name rhymes with Spingran. Spingran, he's going to be gone in about
he's on his way out.
4 months. I'm calling 4 months. Vince McMahon is gone from the WWE.
He's going to have WrestleMania under his belt this year before he goes.
I disagree. They want him gone toot sweet. Federal FBI investigation. They raided the guy's house. He's going to be gone.
What?
He's a black. He's the shit stain in the back of the shorts of TKO. That's what he is.
let's talk old school real quick. What are some old school NWA angles you feel are gold that didn't get enough love back in the day?
NWA angles.
NWA Crockett Promotions. I associate Crockett Promotions with the NWA. He was the NWA there for about 5-6 years. Because they just, Ric Flair went on Memphis TV once and you never saw him again. I never saw him in Mid-South that I can remember, ever. Like, they were their own separate promotions at that point in time.
Breaking Dusty's arm with a baseball bat in the parking lot, the Four Horsemen.
See, that's easy. That's an easy layup.
The Road Warriors turning heel and taking a spike to Dusty's eye.
That we could cover because that was so bad.
And then he bled, and he wasn't allowed to bleed on TV under the rules of management. And then he got fired and had to go to WWE.
Yeah.
And then,
All right, think about it.
The series of matches with Flair and Terry Funk. Terry Funk became a commentator. He became a commentator.
Okay.
And it led to a series of matches, and he was aligned himself with J-Tech Corporation, as it was called, the J-Tex Corporation, which consisted of Gary Hart as the manager, the Great Muta as Funk's tag team partner. And when it began, there was one other guy in the corporation, I believe. You never saw him again. He was just a jobber heel. I'm thinking maybe Tijo Khan. Sting versus
Muta. There's a good one. That was a good short-run feud. That was a good one.
Sting versus Muta came as an offshoot from Flair Muta. Yep. And the J-Tex Corporation storyline. I remember, I think it was a Clash of the Champions, when Flair and Funk and Muta, they were all beating up on Flair, and Sting came out and rescued Flair. And the fight spilled out of the ring, and Flair's bleeding, and they interviewed Flair. I think it might have been Bob Cottle. Bob the Bottle Cottle interviewed Flair, shaking his arm shaking, and Flair says, I just want to tell you right now, I never said thank you to anybody, but tonight, Sting, thank you. And that was a beginning, a true beginning of a Ric Flair face turn when he thanks Sting.
I like that idea. I like that idea a lot. But you think about it, put out the poll. Bottles, that's all I got tonight, buddy.
That's all I got. Guys, don't forget, please give us a thumbs up. And please subscribe. Not going to go to a long diatribe. People get tired of that. They do.
Appreciate you guys joining, though, for real. Give us a thumbs up.
Have a good one, guys.
Till next week, Gordon Soley saying so long from the Sunshine State.